And welcome back, everyone, to episode 75 of the Sports Coverage Podcast. My name is Andrew, alongside my co-host Chase for today, who is going to introduce the amazing guest that will be joining us today to talk some Big 12 sports. Chase, take it away.
So today I'm going to be in the driver's seat as we have ESPN play-by-play caller for Big 12 football, basketball, baseball, Pete Sousa. Pete, how are you doing today?
Man, I'm great, and it's good to be up with some of my boys from the Northeast. You know, I'm back in Texas, but nothing like catching up with a couple dudes from Jersey.
All right.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah.
So we're gonna hop straight into it, starting with last year in Big 12 football. We all saw Arizona State were the Big 12 champions. Talked about this a little bit when I met you in New York, but for the podcast, who do you think is gonna be crowned the Big 12 champion for this 25-26 season?
You know, I've been leaning heavily towards Baylor and Texas Tech. Those are two schools that, Texas Tech did so much in the offseason to get better. And, they did it through a lot of work in the transfer portal and a lot of work recruiting. And, this is next year, there'll be a $20.5 million salary cap pretty much on NFL or on athletic departments. But that's not till next year. So Texas Tech is taking full advantage of the fact that they can spend all the money that they have, $100 million on their roster, right? And they're doing it. And so they are loaded. And as far as Baylor is concerned, they returned Sawyer Robertson, who is probably one of the most underrated quarterbacks in the country. And he will be, around these parts, right, in Texas and Big 12 country, we know who he is. But pretty soon the rest of the world, I think, is going to know exactly who he is as well. 6'4", huge arm, kid from West Texas. He played last year, obviously, had a great season and played really strong. And Baylor finished 8-4. And everybody's back for Baylor. 4 of their 5 offensive linemen. Their quarterback, we just talked about, Sawyer Robertson, and their defense, and their running back, Bryson Washington, is just unbelievable. So they returned 2 great players and a great offensive line. And Dave Aranda is the defensive coordinator, and he's Baylor's head coach, but he's a defensive wizard. So Baylor's in pretty good shape as we enter this season.
That was right in our notes. Moving on. So the sleepers for the Big 12 this season, I had personally, were Baylor, of course, returning with Sawyer Robertson and Bryson Washington, who last year was a freshman, didn't play that many games, but the games he did play were electric. And Cincinnati returning with Brendan Sorsby, transferred to Lee Walker, who came from Oklahoma, great running back. I want to say Cyrus Allen, their receiver. So who would you say, other than Baylor and Cincinnati, who are your sleepers for the Big 12 this season?
I'll tell you, that's a great question. And I think it might be Oklahoma State. And here's why. Oklahoma State had their worst season since 1991 last year. And it was the worst season Mike Gundy's ever had in 20 years coaching at Oklahoma State. I can't imagine that he would replicate a performance like that. It's just not – when you look at the body of work, the history and the trends of his career over the course of Oklahoma State, I think last year was his first losing season. He's a great coach. And Oklahoma State was predicted atop the Big 12 last year, and a lot of things went wrong. They were ravaged by injuries. Their defense was terrible. And I just don't think that there's any way possible that will continue again this year. I think that for Oklahoma State, 1, of course, you need to stay healthy. But 2, I believe the ball will bounce their way this year. They have they have a quarterback battle going on right now, but they got a dude, Hoss Haney, who transferred from TCU. Doug Meacham was the offensive coordinator at TCU. He came to Oklahoma State with this young man, this quarterback. So I think Hoss Haney can end up being a real player in the Big 12, a sleeper as a player. And then I think Oklahoma State could be a real sleeper as a team.
Yeah, I'd love to kind of switch gears to another part of the Big 12. We know that there was a lot of talk about BYU and their quarterback situation, obviously due to some internal struggles with the team there, but they were able to obtain Ryder Lyons, a new 5-star there to help kind of rebolster this team and get them back to potentially the success that they had last season. How do you think that's really going to affect BYU going into this year? And do you think that they can kind of climb back to where they were?
Well, yeah, I do. I think that losing Jake Retzlaff is a huge deal, right? I mean, he ends up going to Tulane. That situation, there's no winners in that situation, right? So, and he ended up getting, he had to leave school because when you go to BYU, you make a pact that you're going to follow this honor code and you can't have premarital sex. And it turns out that Jake did. He admitted that. So he was going to be suspended for 7 games. Rather than face a suspension, he just decides to transfer. So now you mentioned Ryder Lyons, Andrew, and Ryder Lyons is like sensational. And I think that's a sign of what BYU is going to continue to do, both recruiting and on the field. Because if you can recruit studs like that, clearly you're going to see results on the field. Just like they're doing in basketball with A.J. DeBonsa and Igor Demin. Like BYU means business as far as recruiting, and they're getting studs, right? But Ryder Lyons won't be able to take the field till next year. So he's a senior, a rising senior in high school. So they have a 4-way quarterback battle or 3-way quarterback battle at BYU. Right now, there's a kid, McKay Hillstead, he's kind of a mobile quarterback, a dual threat guy, and people are weighing in saying that he will be the one to win the starting job. I like this other kid, Bear Bachmeier, a little more. Him and his brother Tiger both transferred from Stanford. Bear Bachmeier, the quarterback, Tiger's the wide receiver. Bear Bachmeier probably has the most natural God-given ability in that BYU quarterback room right now, but he doesn't have the reps. Having coming over, he transferred after spring ball. So they'll have to figure out that quarterback job. And much like Oklahoma State, a lot of these coaches like to keep up a nice poker face, right? They're not going to show you who's going to be their starter until the absolute last minute. And I think that could be a situation in BYU as well. But I believe that BYU, I think that as good as Jake Retzlaff was last year, it was really the team that lifted BYU to that Alamo Bowl win over Colorado in a solid season.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, another famous quarterback battle, probably the most famous in the Big 12. Go Buff. Over in Boulder, Caden Salter and Julian Lewis, the 5-star, and Caden Salter, the transfer from Liberty, both battling for the QB1 spot. Who do you think will win that quarterback battle, especially with the talent Colorado always recruits for their receivers and running back?
I mean, look, Caden Salter coming in, it's his job, right? Juju Lewis, Andrew, how old are you?
I'm 15.
How old are you, Chase? 15. So Juju Lewis is 2 years older than you guys. He's 17. I mean, could you imagine one of you two dudes right now taking the field? I mean, I know it's 2 years away, but like he's 17. He won't turn 18 until I think the middle of October. So yeah, he is going to be someone that they can lean on and maybe even like put a couple packages in to diversify the offense. But I can't believe on good faith that like Colorado and Pat Shurmur, their offensive coordinator, who used to be a head coach in the NFL, is thinking we're gonna turn the keys over to the 17-year-old, right? The thing is, Coach Prime did take both of them to media day simply because he hadn't been around the team, and he wants both of these guys to know that at any point in time it could be their job. Specifically Juju Lewis. So I think there might be an opportunity for Juju Lewis down the line during the season. But if things go as planned, right, for Colorado, like that means no injuries or no like drastic drop off from his time at Liberty, I think it'll be Caden Salter will be the starter in Colorado, and Juju Lewis will get some time and see the field. But I think they might have to get creative scheme wise to do it.
Yeah, I will say you reacted a bit to Chase saying "Go Buffs," which I do not agree with in any way. We're from the Northeast here. We have our teams here. But I'd love to kind of get your opinion on, we know that Coach Prime has changed this program a lot, and we know that there's a lot more eyes on it now than ever. And with that, probably brings change to the rest of the Big 12 conference as well. Have you noticed that kind of as a member of the media or when you go about your day-to-day job?
That's a great that's a great question. Like, Coach Prime has just put so much juice and pop into the Big 12, a conference that was already, once Brett Yormark took over as commissioner of the Big 12, and he's a guy from the Northeast like us, a New York City guy, knows how to get deals done. And that's all the dude does, is get deals done. You know, Brett Yormark, the commissioner of the Big 12, he used to work with Jay-Z at Rock Nation. He also worked with, he helped the Nets get into their new arena in Brooklyn. And sort of that big city thinking has allowed the Big 12 to evolve, not only as an amazing conference on the field and on the court, but also like very culturally relevant, right? And so that was Brett Yormark's thought process all along. Like, we're going to make this conference culturally relevant. You know, they do a bunch of stuff with the WWE. They're going to have WWE like Friday night SmackDown events the night in like the night before Big 12 games in those cities like Cincinnati and Boulder, and you know, they're going to start over in Ireland. So the Big 12 was already kind of trending up, and then when Deion, you know, surprised a lot of folks and came from Jackson State to Colorado, right as Colorado was moving into the Big 12, it was just a perfect marriage. And there's a lot of not only financial benefits that have come with Deion Sanders entering the Big 12, but there is also just pop culture relevance, right? Like, everybody, I mean, look, Deion gets clicks. You know, I'm starting my show a half hour from now, and we're certainly going to be talking about Coach Prime because there is a general public interest in Coach Prime. When you think about a guy like Deion Sanders, especially for someone my age, I'm in my 40s, right? Like, Deion has been in my life since I'm like 10 years old, 9 years old, younger than that. Like, that's crazy. And he's always been there. Like, and honestly, it's been a pretty positive experience with him. I mean, he was a dual sport athlete, right? Like, he was legit playing for the Yankees. Like, he was a good baseball player, and the Braves and the Reds. I mean, he wasn't going to be like an all-star, but he could have been an everyday starter in Major League Baseball. But, you know, the football commitment was just too big. And he was probably one of the best cornerbacks or returners we've ever seen. And then to actually take your time, too. If you remember, he didn't go right into coaching. It was broadcasting. And it was really like his sons and interest in coaching them all the way back to his son, Deion Jr. Like, that brought him into the game. And being around Texas, you would hear about what he had created high school-wise. And then he goes to Jackson State, and now here he is at Colorado. So, and his ability to have success at every stop. We love greatness, you know? If there was any failure for Deion, thinking quickly off the top of my head, like, when he was on the Yankees, they stunk, and his average probably wasn't any good. But he was still he was playing baseball, like, you know, coming in, playing, then leaving. So I think Deion has brought so much to the Big 12. And I think yesterday, you know, a lot of us around the conference, like, we just wanted him to be okay. And that's super exciting that he is okay and that he's out there talking to men about getting checked for bladder cancer because that's what he had. It was a very real moment. And I think that yesterday was an illustration of how special of a guy he is just across the board.
I will say real quick, I am an avid watcher of baseball and, of course, Northeast. I'm a huge Yankees fan up here. You are correct that he was not exactly the greatest baseball player for us. I think he was batting in like the 150s in his second year, but it's still just ridiculous that he was even able
He might
to
be able
make
to
that
help
team.
you guys out now, Andrew, the way you've been playing recently.
100%.
Yeah. Woo!
I'd rather have him than Giancarlo Stanton in right field right now.
Well,
so,
and maybe you'd rather have him managing the team than Aaron Boone.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Every day, it's Aaron Boone's telling us how we're gonna turn the corner. It's all right in front of us. We'll see.
We'll see. Exactly.
Making our last note on football, there are a lot of returners this year for the Big 12. Specifically for Arizona, Noah Fafita had an amazing sophomore year 2 years ago. Last year, he still had a great year. His yards went up. His touchdowns, he's running the same, meant more interceptions. But that Arizona team overall was disappointing. But Kansas State last year, Avery Johnson returning, Jace Brown returning, Dylan Edwards returning. Those three were dynamic for Kansas State. Obviously, they also had DJ Giddens, but he went into the draft. So, who are your eyes on as a returner this year for in the Big 12?
Avery Johnson, you nailed it. I feel like that's a guy that could. I mean, some people are like he could be a Heisman candidate if things go right for him. And the improvement for him from year 1 to year 2 obviously is going to be critical. And he has had an opportunity to learn from Matt Wells, their new offensive coordinator, who's a great offensive coordinator and really could help Avery Johnson. And I think when you get a coordinator like that with a lot of juice coming to the program, last year their offensive coordinator at Kansas State was a former offensive line coach. It just didn't go great. And I think it was, we're in such a what have you done for me lately and what are you doing now era of sports. Chris Kleiman, Kansas State's coach, really couldn't wait around to make a change. So he made the change. He brings in Matt Wells. This guy, Matt Wells, is a stud. He has Avery Johnson's full attention. I think that will help Avery Johnson. I mean, if you watch him play, his skills are amazing. I mean, throwing and running, right? There's a development and a decision-making that needs to improve and get sharper. And I think Matt Wells can really bring it out of him. So Avery Johnson is a guy based on – and Avery Johnson's attitude is really good. I was around him at Big 12 Media Days and obviously covering him for a while. He just wants to get better. He stayed at Kansas State, could have gone other places. And I think he's really, really good.
Now making our transition over to basketball, obviously Big 12 basketball, much more storied history, always a much better conference compared to football than basketball. Last year, Houston, obviously dominant in the 2020s. Who do you think will be the champion next year for the Big 12, if there's an obvious answer?
Let's see. You got me. This is like a way too early champion. But I'll tell you what, Texas Tech is a team that you've got to be interested in early. BYU, obviously, they have a ton of guys coming back, and they add A.J. DeBonsa. Kevin Young, their coach, is like boy wonder. Everybody loves him. They made it to the Sweet 16 last year. Think of some other Big 12 teams. I mean, Baylor, you have to kind of wait and see. Their whole lineup, their whole roster just turned over. Kansas State, again, that's like another wait and see. So I would say Texas Tech atop the conference alongside BYU right now off the top of my head. And then Houston, of course. How could I forget? Houston, no question about it. Kelvin Sampson continues to recruit like dogs to that school, and he gets them to play his way. And his way clearly is the right way because they have such success defensively every single year. I watch it with my own eyes calling these games, and I go to Houston practices the day before a game, and I see how hard these guys work. And I talk to Coach Sampson, and it's very real, their ferocity defensively. And he's going to be 70, I think, this coming year, but he's coaching like he's 50. So one of those three teams.
So, you mentioned kind of the Baylor situation, which has clearly been something on a lot of people's minds. Of course, VJ Edgecombe went to the draft, and then there were a ton of transfers, a ton of graduating players as well. But that's kind of that new era of the transfer portal and NIL really, really, really hitting a team hard, especially in a historically big franchise and big league like the Big 12 and like Baylor. So how have you kind of noticed this new era of basketball hitting the Big 12 and now Baylor? Like, how is that really going to affect them for the future?
Well, I think it's hitting everywhere, and so like that's something where it was pretty crazy to see Baylor lose every single player from their roster the year before. Now, it wasn't quite as bad as it looked. Rob Wright, the guy from Philly, leaving to go to BYU really hurt because they expected him to stay. And it was like really a shock to them that he left. So there was a little bit like it was almost jarring for Scott Drew and the program. They have a kid, Tunde Yesufu, coming in who's going to be amazing. He dominated at the Hoop Summit, played pretty well at the McDonald's game. And they have a bunch of transfers that are going to come in, and it's not like the highly touted VJ Edgecombe type guys that are coming in. It's the kind of guys that Scott Drew believes he can get to stay for 3-4 years. So to your question, like, I think it's the same everywhere, right? Like, that's what's happening in college basketball. And it's kind of fun to see how these different historic coaches approach it, right? And how they want to go forward. Like, Scott Drew is like, okay, well, we got this guy Tunde Yesufu who's coming in, who's a blue chip 5-star prospect. Maybe he's a 4-star, but he's awesome. And let's surround players like that with dudes that aren't going to need the ball all the time, right? And aren't going to cost us a ton of money and are going to learn how to play basketball the way we play it, and stick their nose in.
Speaking of guys like Tunde Yesufu coming in this year, the Big 12 in general had 3 top 5 to come in. Not those top 5 stars, top 5 players in the country. AJ Dibanza to BYU, of course. Darren Peterson, the number 1 player in the country, going to Kansas, and Chris Nack going to Houston. What do you think that does for the Big 12 this year, bringing in players like that, as they always have, but these 3 premier players who were like the top 3 players in their class?
Well, I mean, I think, the Big 12 is a juggernaut. And I think, like, you show even Kansas last year after struggling, like, they still, it's almost like Bill Self, he doesn't recruit, he reloads, right? And, that's those schools, and the Big 12 is very fortunate because you not only have these powers like Kansas, right? And even Iowa State is emerging. They're just consistent. But then you have schools like Texas Tech who are going to spend a lot of money to get superstars, which they have done already. So it's wild to see all the great players that Texas Tech have brought in and they have hung on to. Out in Lubbock, Texas, and West Texas, not exactly a destination for dudes. But it's an amazing environment they have there and amazing support for that program and from that school. Once you get there, you understand the magic about it. But I have no expectation for this to change. I really think that the Big 12 is arguably the best conference in college basketball. The SEC, you could argue, and maybe I'm being a bit of a homer, but the Big 12 is awesome. It really is. I got time for one more question.
Perfect.
What's it going to be, Coach Prime?
Speaking of Kansas, you said earlier that Kansas struggled last year, but over the years, what people, I would say, call in Kansas the Hunter Dickinson era of Kansas has not been as productive as they've been in the past. The Andrew Wiggins era, the Joel Embiid era. But they have Darren Peterson coming in, who's the number 1 player in the country, has big expectations. Would you say Kansas had a monumental fall, and would you say that with Darren Peterson coming in, they are returning to where they should be and where they always have been?
Okay, I'm going to tell you what happened. And that's a great question, Chase, because I watched it happen last year. And I'm not a coach, right? I played football in college, but I didn't play basketball. That's actually not true. I went to football to play college, had a heart problem. It kept me on scholarship, but I never saw the field. University of Richmond. Thank you to Coach Reed. Took good care of me. So back to basketball. Kansas has always had the opportunity to get the best players, but Bill Self has had time to develop those players. Whether it is like the 6 months leading up to the season or 2-3 years to have a guy in his system. Last year was the first year they had a bunch, and I'm saying a bunch, or at least the first year I noticed that there were some struggles there with all the talent they brought in at one time. And it was very clear at certain points in the season that, like, these guys hadn't been working together for more than a couple months. And like, that's everybody. And I think Bill Self, at some points in the season was crouching down in the middle of that huddle in these Big 12 battles in these crazy environments. And he's looking at these faces and he's thinking, who are these kids? Like, I don't really even know them, and I think, like, that is an effort that you're going to see someone, a power like Kansas and Bill Self try to maybe stay open to another avenue. Like Darren Peterson is a guy who that's a freshman. He comes in, right? Like they get time to work with them. Like there's a longer runway for that commitment. I think that will suit this Bill Self team a little better than like those quick fixes that come over in the transfer portal. They're still going to come, and that's still going to happen. But I think we're watching a lot of on-the-job training for these major league, uber successful coaches. This is a brand new day. So they're human just like us, and they're learning, how to navigate the nuances of the portal and the new recruiting era, just like everybody else, but they're doing it right before our eyes. So it can get pretty interesting.
All right, that's going to wrap up the episode then. Thank you so much, Pete. We're going to hand over to Andrew for the outro.
Yeah, thank you so much, Pete Sousa, for joining us on the 75th episode of the Sports Coverage Podcast. You can check out all of our other stuff over on Instagram, and make sure you check out Mr. Sousa's show, which he mentioned he is going to film right after this. So if you don't mind plugging that real quick.
Show. It's the Pete Sousa show on YouTube. Yeah, and also watch Inside the 12. And I'll be calling Inside the 12 is a weekly show for Big 12 basketball and football. It's in all Big 12 markets, but it's also going to be, you can watch it on ESPN Plus, I think, or TNT Sports. And then, I'll be calling college football and college basketball, so be on the lookout.
Awesome.
Yep. Yeah,
Thank you again. Thank you, everyone, so much for listening to this week's episode, and we will see you all next week.
I'll see you guys at episode 1.